Good morning again, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for your interest in the college admissions process. We are excited to be here with you today and provide you some hopefully really good information that answers some of your questions. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I am going to start the session today with an introduction. So my name is Jessica Simerson, and I am the Career Specialist for Adult Education. What that means is that I'm here to help you figure out your next goal beyond your ESL course completion and to help you achieve that goal or that dream however I can. I also work with our adult education GED students and just try to help you guys figure out what's next on your path and how we can get you there. So we also have on the call today with us Lori Basham. She is the Director of Admissions for West Georgia Technical College. So I asked if she could join us today to be available to answer your questions. I have a little bit of knowledge, but I don't have all the answers for sure. So I asked Ms. Basham to join us to be available to answer your questions. So we're going to go through some information and then we will have a chance to answer questions at the end to see what questions you've got. We may answer them as we're going through the information. So at the end, we will have time to answer your questions. So we will go ahead and move right on into the information. Also, I just want to let you know that the slides, the presentation that I'm going through is saved here where you can access that, and the other files that we share you should have access to through this Blackboard session. If you would like that information and you can't access it here, I can send that to your instructors as well if you would like this information to have for yourself for later. But we will also record the session and you can go back and watch it again later. So what we want to talk about today is the admissions process if you would like to attend a program here at West Georgia Technical College once you've completed your ESL classes. So we call that the admissions process. So I know Ms. Hicks said that she was talking with her students today about admissions and what that means. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about what the admissions process looks like. So what are the steps? How do you start, and then where do you go next? So the things we're going to try to cover today are the documentation requirements. So what things are you required to provide to the college before you can be admitted and start attending a credit side program? One of those is your college or high school transcript and how you would need to have those translated into English. There are specific companies that can do that for you. So we will talk a little bit about that. What programs are available to you as an ESL graduate? So are there certain programs that you might not be able to go into, or what things are available and open to you upon your ESL completion? And then we're also going to cover the cost of the programs and financial aid that might be available to you. So those are kind of the things that we're going to go over in a little bit more detail. So we'll move right on ahead. So for the college admissions process, there is specific documentation that you have to submit before you can attend one of the credit side programs. So one of the first steps is to complete the online admissions application. So that can be found on the West Georgia Technical College website, and I can send that information out when you're ready for that. I can send you the link to that application and how you get that started. It's very similar to the registration process that you went through for the ESL program. So there is an online application that you did during that process, and you do a very similar thing for college admissions. So one of the documents that you must provide is your high school or college transcript. We'll go into a little bit more detail about that in the next slide. You also have to provide proof of Georgia residency and verification of lawful presence in the United States. So there is an image here on the screen of a Georgia driver's license. If you have a state of Georgia driver's license and it has the items circled in red, so the star in the top right-hand corner, and if it has an issue date that's more than a year old, so that's in that yellow box, then that is proof of both Georgia residency and lawful presence. So if you have a driver's license that has both of those items, that is what you would need as far as your documentation requirements outside of your transcript. So Lori, you may have to unmute yourself. I don't think I can unmute you from here, but did you have, yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. A little bit about the Georgia driver's license, and we'll probably get into this a little later, but if it's a limited term driver's license, it may have the star, but if it says limited term, you must have a resident alien card in order to get that in-state residency. So if you have an employment authorization card and you may have then a limited term driver's license, then that has different financial implications. So just keep that in mind as we're going through that, because all of you may have different circumstances, but the limited term driver's license is not one that we can take. So just wanted to throw that out there real quick.
Thank you, Lori. I will say as well, we're going to go through all of this information, but one thing that I would like for you to think about is if you would like to go to college, my recommendation for you is for you to gather all of your documentation and then go and speak with one of our admissions counselors on campus for them to look at your documentation and verify for you that what you have is what they need. And then you can move forward in the process from there. But I want to give you an idea today of what documentation you would need to provide. And then if you would like to set up an appointment with me to go and speak with admissions, we can do that. Or you can go and talk with one of the admissions counselors on campus and let them look at your documentation to determine if you have everything that they need. So it's really a case-by-case basis for you guys. So that means each person's situation is unique and your documentation is unique, and what they may need from you is also unique. So it's important for us to have that conversation with the admissions office of what your documentation is and what else they might need from you. So we're going to go ahead to our next slide. So transcript translation services. So if you completed your high school education or any college education in your home country, you will need to submit a copy of your transcript that has been translated into English and evaluated before you would be admitted to the college. So the evaluation has to be written in English, and it must be based off of the United States Department of Education standards. So there are very specific standards in the United States that we follow, and your transcript has to be translated and then evaluated based off of those standards before it can be submitted to our admissions office. So there are several different companies that can do that. In order for it to be accepted by West Georgia Tech specifically, the company that performs that translation and evaluation has to be recognized by the National Association of Credential Evaluation Services. So there is a website here on this slide, and that is the National Association of Credential Evaluation Services website that lists the providers that they recognize. So it gives you a listing of companies that you can use to perform this service. And then once that has been done, you can submit that to our admissions office. So if you wanted to continue your education with West Georgia Technical College, you would need to submit that information, and our office can determine what credits you have taken previously that would count for a program with West Georgia Technical College. So Ms. Hicks had put a question from Erica saying that she has a bachelor's degree in computer science from Mexico and wanted to know how she can make it valid in this country. So this is one way to do that, is to have it translated and evaluated by one of these companies, and then hanging on to that information for future employers, so that once you've completed your ESL program, if you wanted to apply for a job in the computer science field in the US, you would have that translated and evaluated transcript that you can provide to employers. And what that will give them is the equivalent United States program in comparison to what you completed in Mexico. And different employers may have different requirements. So that which company they may want you to use for that could be different depending on who you apply to a job with or what company you're wanting to work for. So you could have your transcript translated through one of these companies that are approved, and then hang on to that information to provide to future employers. But we can't guarantee that the employer is going to accept whichever version from the company that you choose. So it's really up to you if you wanted to wait until you're ready to start applying for some jobs and then determine what translation company that employer may want. So Ms. Hicks also had a question about how much do these companies usually charge for transcript evaluation? And I don't have a good answer to that question. It really depends on the depth of the translation. So if you fully completed a program, they might not charge as much to translate that transcript. But if they were needing to evaluate individual courses or individual classes and not a full program, they may charge you more for that because that is more work. So that price can vary, and different companies charge different amounts. So I've definitely heard as low as $200, but it could be much more than that depending on what you need. And Miss Tricia put a question in the chat that says, I have a transcript translation for the company Worldwide Education Consultant Services in Texas. Is this company recognized? I do believe that they are. That is something I would have to double verify on the website listed here, but I can look into that and let you know 100% for sure. But I do believe they are a recognized company. Okay, so we're going to continue on. And again, we will try to answer more questions at the end as well. So how do you prove Georgia residency, or what is that requirement? So the requirement for you to receive in-state tuition is that you must be a resident of the state of Georgia for 12 months prior to you applying for admission. There is a list here of different items that you can use to verify residency. So before I go into that, I want to let you know that even if you aren't determined to be a resident of Georgia, you can still attend, but you would be charged a higher tuition rate depending on whether you're listed as an out-of-state resident or an international student. And we'll go into that a little bit later, but here are the things that would qualify as proof of Georgia residency. So one is proof of home ownership in Georgia for the past 12 months, a notarized letter on company letterhead if you are leasing from someone in the state of Georgia, 12 months of utility bills that could either be electric bills, cable bills, or water bills that would not include any cell phone bill that you might have. Also, a Georgia state income tax, the Form 500, the Georgia driver's license that we talked about earlier that is at least 1 year old, a Georgia automobile registration, or Georgia voter registration. So these are the items that our admissions office would accept to prove Georgia residency that will qualify you for in-state tuition. Ms. Basham, did you want to add anything to that before we move on?
That is the list. Residency can get confusing because you have to first satisfy lawful presence before we will even look at the Georgia residency. So as Jessica said, a lot of times it's an individual basis. So this is just an overview of the requirements, because a lot of times you may have a unique situation that we have to look at. But that is from TCSG, that is the residency requirements.
Thank you. So TCSG, for those that may not know, that's the Technical College System of Georgia. So that's basically the group that oversees all the technical colleges in the state. So that's basically our bosses at the state level they give us directives on what we're allowed to accept for Georgia residency and for different other things as well, that they will tell us the policy and the procedure that we are required to follow on the state level. So that's what TCSG is. All right, so we're going to continue on. So Ms. Basham talked about lawful presence, and that is where the admissions office is usually going to start, is getting a verification of lawful presence before they will verify Georgia residency or in-state tuition. So lawful presence means that you are either a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and we're going to talk about what those mean. So the documentation that you would need to provide to verify your lawful presence, and lawful presence is defined by TCSG, and it is defined by even federal regulations that we have to follow. So it's not how we define lawful presence, it's how those that are above us define that. So the documents that are acceptable that would verify your lawful presence are either a Georgia driver's license, a Georgia ID, a U.S. birth certificate, a current and valid permanent resident card, a U.S. certificate of citizenship, or a U.S. certificate of naturalization. So these are the documents that you would need to provide one of these to prove your lawful presence in the state of Georgia in the United States. And these are the items that you could use to prove that. So Ms. Basham, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are not able to provide one of these documents to verify your lawful presence, you can still attend, but you would be charged the international student tuition rate. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. You can. And I do want to go back to, because I don't want you to be misled when it says Georgia driver's license and a Georgia ID. Keep in mind, it has to be a real ID, which means, it's always strange, but a real ID means it has that star on the upper right-hand corner, and it does not have limited term on the license or the ID.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to reiterate for everyone that if you can't prove Georgia residency or lawful presence, you can still attend West Georgia Technical College, but you would be charged a higher tuition rate than in-state resident type students who can prove those things with that documentation. Okay, so already said this a little bit. If you're unable to prove that residency or that lawful presence, you can still attend. So if you are able to prove lawful presence, but not Georgia residency, you would be charged out-of-state tuition, which is 2 times the in-state rate, which would currently be $200 per credit hour. So our charges are per credit hour by semester. So that's how you would be charged if you could prove lawful presence, but not Georgia residency. If you cannot prove lawful presence and you cannot prove Georgia residency, then you would be charged the international rate for tuition, which is 4 times the in-state rate. So that's $400 per credit hour currently, just for your tuition charges. There are also, in addition to tuition charges, fees that students pay each semester. And then in addition to that, you would have books and supplies and any other expenses that you would need to pay for attending the college. So that's how your residency and lawful presence impact what you're charged. So we will, there are some questions about the different types of visas. I'm going to hold off until the end to answer those, because I'm probably going to need Ms. Basham to answer those of which types of visas. And again, that may have to be answered on a case-by-case basis with someone in our admissions office. So we had one question from Ms. Hicks about what programs are available for our ESL graduates. So the only programs that we would restrict, or you might not be able to go into, are the competitive selection healthcare programs. So there's the list here of all of those programs. If you are interested in going into one of those programs, you would want to be able to prove your residency and lawful presence before you apply to those programs. The reason behind that is that preference for the seats in those programs is given to resident students. So students that are a resident of Georgia will have the first opportunity to fill the available seats in those programs. If there are seats left over, then out-of-state residents and international students may be considered for those seats, but that does not typically happen. Usually those seats are all filled by resident students. So if you are interested in going into one of these healthcare programs, the best advice we could give you is to wait until you can prove Georgia residency and lawful presence before you go into that program. Because otherwise, it's not very likely that you would get accepted into those programs. So program cost and financial aid. Program cost is dependent on many factors, including your resident status and how many classes you take each semester. So like we talked about earlier, that tuition rate can either be double or quadruple the amount that an in-state student would pay based on your residence and lawful presence status. Your tuition and fees are charged each semester and do not include your books or your supplies. There is a total estimated cost of a program. We have a list of those. That is a document I have shared in the Blackboard classroom today, but we can also share that with your instructor for you to take a look at. The cost that is listed there is for an in-state student. So if you are looking at that cost and you know that you're going to be considered either out of state or international, then your cost is going to be much more than what is listed on that estimated cost document. You must be either a legal permanent resident or a citizen of the United States in order to be eligible for federal financial aid. So the aid that is available to residents of Georgia or permanent residents or citizens of the United States is not available to anyone that does not fall in one of those categories as far as federal financial aid goes. So federal financial aid is what you would apply for when you do a FAFSA form. So FAFSA is for federal financial aid funding. You also must be able to prove Georgia residency for 2 years in order to qualify for state financial aid. So those are two different types of financial aid. There's federal aid and there's state aid. If you are not a permanent resident, but you've been a Georgia resident for 2 years and you have the documentation to prove that, you may qualify for state aid, but not federal aid. And that's a conversation that you can have with someone in our financial aid department. So we have the admissions office that can help answer questions about your resident status, your lawful present status, and then the financial aid department on each campus could assist you with knowing what kinds of aid you might be eligible to receive. So we are going to open up for some questions now. And Ms. Basham, we do have a couple of questions in the chat about what kinds of visas are accepted. Can you answer those questions?
Okay, so if you have like an employment authorization card, if you're a dependent of somebody like with a TD visa, those type of things, you can attend West Georgia Tech. However, you will be charged the foreign rate. You have to have a permanent resident card or be a U.S. citizen for in-state consideration or out-of-state consideration. So we do not issue student visas.
So the questions in the chat said, I think you addressed TD. They also said TN visa or E2 visa.
No, they would still be foreign. So yes, you could start school, but you would be considered foreign for tuition purposes.
So with those visa types, you would be charged that 4 times tuition rate amount. You can attend, but you would be charged that additional tuition.
Correct.
Are there any other questions? Please type those into the chat. We will be happy to answer any other questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions right now. If you have more questions, we're happy to answer that. And my contact information is here on the screen. Ms. Hicks is asking if I can explain the process of getting a GED. So I don't know that I have all the process that I know for you guys, but basically you would start off the same way that you start off with your ESL courses. So you would go through a registration process. You would take a pre-test for that for us to determine what level you're currently at. Then we would assign you to a class and give you your class days and times. You would start attending, and your instructor will assess you as you're in the program to determine when you're ready to start taking the GED exam. So the GED exam has 4 sections, and your instructor would help you know when you're ready to take each section of that exam. And then once you have successfully passed all 4 sections, you will have earned that GED credential. I hope that answered your question. Let me know if you have a more specific question about that process. We do have funding available to help pay for the GED testing. So once you're in the program, we can assist you with paying for that GED exam. Any other questions? If you have a transcript that has been translated and approved and you submit that to the admissions office, you would not still need to get a GED. The GED, the benefit to getting the GED is that when those scores are entered from your GED, that means that you do not have to take the AccuPlacer exam that other students are required to take. Ms. Basham, if you want to jump in here, if they have a transcript from another country that's been translated and submitted, would they still be required to take AccuPlacer, or is that dependent upon what classes they've previously taken?
Yes, without seeing the transcript, we'd have to see it in order to, if it's a high school transcript and it does not have a U.S. equivalent GPA listed, then they would need to test. If they have a college transcript evaluated and it's done on a course-by-course basis, and it demonstrates that they've completed the equivalent of a United States English and United States Algebra, then they would not have to take the test. But without seeing it, it's hard to do a blanket statement.
So it's another one of those, this is a case-by-case basis where you would need to take that transcript to the admissions office, and they would need to look at that with you to verify whether or not you would have to take the testing that is required for the college side classes, which is called the AccuPlacer. So thank you, Erica, for your feedback there, and thank you, Raina, for your feedback. Any other questions from anyone before we wrap up today? Thank you, Marian. Again, I have recorded this session. Once that is processed and ready, I will send that out to your instructors so that you can go back and watch it later if you need a reminder of any of this information. Also, my contact information is here on the screen. If you have more questions or if you would like my help, please feel free to reach out to me. I do travel to each campus about once a month, so we can make an appointment to talk or make an appointment to take your documentation to the admissions office and have them look at it with us. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you again to Ms. Hicks for sending me some questions and helping me decide to set up this session for everyone. We appreciate all of you, and we are so proud of you for your hard work in your program. Keep up the great work. You can do this. And just know that we have a lot of people here cheering you on and supporting you as you work towards your goal. And again, if there's anything that I can help you with, feel free to reach out or talk with your instructor and they can reach out to me as well. We can also plan a time for me to come and visit your class if you would like, if you've got more questions or if there's anything that I can help you with. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.